afternoon screening. So we're going to have a panel discussion now for about 20 minutes, and then after that there'll be a short intermission. You're welcome to stay on site and visit the Cinema Cafe, and then our evening screenings will start at 6:30 p.m. So I'd like to introduce our panel this afternoon. As I mentioned before the screening, we have the director, Doris Liu, and we're also very honored to have two exceptional guest speakers with us today. Michel Juneau-Katsuya, who is an international security and national security expert with a really solid background in Canadian national security and international security as well. And then we have David Kilgour, who's a former MP, Canadian MP, and a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. So I'd just like to kick off the discussion.
First of all, thank everyone coming to this film festival to see my film in a sunny afternoon. Saturday afternoon, you would be enjoying the sunshine, the last sunshine before the winter comes. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it.
The Confucius institutions closed throughout Toronto since it was a Toronto board decision, or Toronto school board decision. So I'm just wondering if it was, were all of those Confucius institutions closed through the greater Toronto area?
In Toronto, you saw Toronto District School Board closed. Not really closed because it didn't even physically open yet. So but there's one in Seneca College, and in Ontario we have the closest one here is Carleton University. They have one, and Waterloo University and Brock University. So 4 active Confucius institutes in Ontario, and all across Canada there are 12. 2 in BC, 1 in Edmonton, 2 in Saskatchewan, and 1 in New Brunswick, 1 St. Mary University, and 12. And all around the world, there are, you saw the number, right now there are over 1,000 Confucius institutes across the world. And they also have a smaller, called Confucius Classroom, which is in secondary schools, not in universities or colleges. So across the world, there are over, I don't know how many over 1,000? Yeah, Confucius classrooms.
So my second question is then, what is Canadian government opinion or views on this? Have you responded to some of these important, I think, really important concerns that the Canadian government should have, right?
That's a good question. While I was making this film, I reached out to 2 levels of government, the federal and provincial, because the city municipal government would not have any right roles in this. Unfortunately, I didn't get any response from the federal level, because we don't have, in Canada, we don't have a Ministry of Education. That's one issue. And at the provincial level, I reached out to Ontario, it's called Ministry of College, and that, I don't recall the full name, but they gave me an email response, which didn't mention any of the concerns raised by my film, but rather they boast the good relationship or strong relationship between Ontario and China and says China is a very important partner, which I agree, but the question is how we engage China. And in BC, I reached out to, because in BC, one Confucius Institute is hosted by Coquitlam School District, which is in high schools. And I reached out to the Ministry of Education in BC, and they didn't want to participate in my film, and they just gave me a phone call and says the minister was not available for an interview, and the ministry has no roles in regulating the Confucius Institutes in the Coquitlam School Board, because the Confucius Institute offers weekend class and after school class. So according to BC School Act, the ministry would have no say in that program. But again, they didn't respond to any of the concerns. It's particularly the human rights concerns. They didn't say anything about that.
Thank you. My name's Eric Schiller. I'm here because one of the panel members said I should come and ask a question. Here's the question. Look, I enjoyed this film. Someone would say, look, big countries always have cultural centres overseas. The British have the British Council, the French have the Alliance Française, the Germans have the Goethe Institute. Why don't you allow the Chinese to have their own overseas cultural centre? Now, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear yours.
My answer? Okay. David, you want to go first?
Yes, I'm the panelist he knows, so I have to give a good answer. You know, my brother went to the Goethe Institute in Germany. I lived in the Alliance Française in Paris. And let me make a quick confession. Anyone here being at university in the 60s? I had the little red book of Mao, and please forgive me, I actually believed it. I thought this was a nice man. You know that lovely picture in the Ganges, in the Yangtze River? Anyway, I have been trying to make up for my stupidity for some time now. And I just, let me salute, this movie is so well done, and she's got people's facial expressions so well, and she's got the bad people and the good people, and I just can't say enough good things about this film. But sorry, you're going to have your turn.
I have this. I think many people will have that question, even including myself. When I first started to do the research into this issue, I was wondering, okay, why not a Confucius Institute, right? But the thing is, I found out two major differences between Confucius Institutes and all the other cultural and language and education centers. Is one, Confucius Institute is directly run and funded and controlled by the government of China, and namely Communist Party of China. Because according to the Confucius Institute, they have a constitution. It's just published on their website. I found that. It says Confucius Institute is run by Hanban. You saw in the film. Hanban is under Ministry of Education in China and is overseen by a council, which the member of the council are from various ministries of Chinese government or the Department of Communist Party. And the council is chaired by one of the Politburo members of the Communist Party of China. So any directives goes to Hanban and then goes to any Confucius Institutes would come from that council. And you can imagine all the members are Communist Party members and high-ranking officials. So that is one very major differences between Confucius Institutes and all the other. And the second one is all the other language and cultural education institutions, they run by themselves physically. They have their own premises. They do not seek to embed or seed themselves into an establishing foreign education institutions. But this one is the strategic model chosen by Hanban, by Chinese government, which is just plant, attach, or seed, or embed, whatever word you use, the Confucius Institutes into establishing well-reputed, prestigious foreign universities, colleges, and school boards. Yeah.
I will add a third difference. They're spy. Period. As you know, I'm a national security expert. I work now for, I work over 21 years for CSIS, and I don't dare to say how many years in total I've been in the field. But this is one of the differences that there is. And it's interesting because this center has the Goethe Institute here, right here. So the big difference is that you need to understand the relationship that the Chinese government has with its various organizations in order to promote what the Chinese government wants to promote. Nothing new under the sun. Other countries are doing exactly the same thing. This movie is not an anti-Chinese movie or anti-Chinese culture. Nobody's against virtue. Who doesn't want to learn a foreign language? Who doesn't want to learn a foreign culture? This is a richness, a gold mine that everybody should try to exploit. Unfortunately, or explore, I should say. Unfortunately, within the strategy of the Chinese government was to be capable, under the cloth of friendship and everything, to be capable to infiltrate other form of activities. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which I served for 21 years, as I mentioned, I was in charge of watching what was coming from Asia. Not only China, Korea, Malaysia, name it. From Afghanistan all the way to North Korea, that was my playground. And we were responsible to protect the interests of the Canadian government and the interests of the Canadian citizen abroad as much as in Canada. The Confucius Institute are not the only one being watched by the Canadians. There's many countries and many intelligence services that concur with our conclusions that unfortunately this was a Trojan horse. This was a way to bring intelligence officer or to collect information in order eventually for intelligence officer to target certain individuals that went to that institute to study with the right intentions. But that was part of their game. And again, this is my game. This is my rule. This is what I've been doing for so many years. You know, I'm a spook. That's what we try to do. We try to sort of understand what the opponent, not the enemy, what the opponent is trying to achieve. And this is what we've been capable to uncover. Now, since what we've done in Toronto, since the movie came out and everything, we've seen the Chinese government starting to change its strategy. Not necessarily its methodology, but just the strategy and trying to sort of achieve the same thing differently. That's part of the game. And it's going to go on and on and on for quite a while. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people from my line of work that will stay in business for quite a long period of time. But from the question of what the Canadian government is doing about all this, well, they kind of listen to CSIS to a certain extent. They expect CSIS to be capable to report and to warn as much as possible. But there's an ambivalence with the Canadian government because we want to do business with China. We want to try to do as much as possible with this Klondike that they promised and stuff like that. And a lot of elected officials will be lured and seduced by the idea of going to work with China. And they're good. They're darn good at seducing and whining and dining. You know, the big fat man, he said that in the movie. You know, they whine and dine me and stuff like that. Yeah, you got cut like a fish. Exactly, this is the way they do it. And it worked. It worked, you know, to the point where they Did you see on this desk all the Chinese little things that it has there? You know, these are expensive gifts and stuff. These are indicators that we look for when we want to see if somebody has been compromised. And there's a lot of people who get compromised without even realizing, because they love China, they love the language, they love, listen, this is a country with millennium culture. You know, they have so much culture, they have brought so much to the world and to history and stuff like that. And yet at the same time, they're darn good at what they do, really good. If you want to understand how the Chinese government works, or how the Chinese intelligence works, pick up the game of Go. Pick up the game of Go. This is exactly what the Chinese government wants to do. This is a game that has been existing for thousands of years. Every emperor, every generals, every prime minister in China had a master of Go to teach them, because this is a game of strategy. And everything is on the table. It's right there, right in front of you. And the master at the end has taken off.
And folks, we have time for a few more questions. I'm going to take 3 questions, and then we're going to go to the speakers, and then we're going to wrap. So I'm going to take 3 questions at once, and then we'll wrap up after that. So, sir, you will lead.
Yes, well, I'm glad to see that our spies are keeping an eye on their spies. I know that you have appropriations that you have to get and jobs to protect, so I guess I can't blame you too much. But I'm sorry to see that this might have an impact on education. And regarding the film, I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was more balanced than I was expecting. But you didn't interview anyone who's taken a Confucius Institute course, and I've taken a couple at Carleton. And one was a credit course, one was a non-credit course. There were about 40 in the first, about 20 in the second. 60 people there. You wouldn't find anybody who had any complaint about the content of those courses, that they were propaganda, that there was anything wrong with them. So I wonder what the issue is. And I think it's infinitely insulting to Canadians to think that somebody's going to come over here and give one lecture and it's going to convert people to communist China. I mean, this is ridiculous and insulting, and this is what you're doing. And I'll just say a couple of things about what the Confucius Institute does. Questions for their comment on my comment. And I think they have a program where they take 20 students to China. They spend a couple of weeks there. They visit with the Chinese students. And these kids come back and they have a whole new perspective, exactly what education is about. There's a program I'm involved with, a graduate studies conference, brings together students who are studying China for a conference in Canada that's run exactly the same way as any other academic conference, peer-reviewed, discussions, questions, networking, everything that's essential to education. So I hope we're not going to lose all this because of what you've been arguing here and elsewhere.
Because of this book.
Yeah, let me have go. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just take one more question before we go to comments? Because we need to wrap up in about like 5-10 minutes because of our schedule. Sorry, folks. I would love to have the discussion rolling for like an hour, but we have other fellows this evening, and we'll just take one more question if that's okay.
Thank you for your important work. I encourage you to continue the fight. And my question is, are there any other institutions that any of you know of that the Chinese government also tries to infiltrate in Canada besides education? And is there also any precedent for this from any other country besides China? Anything else that we should be watching out for as citizens of our institutions being infiltrated?
Okay, from the spook point of view, yes, there is more to watch. The Chinese have developed what we call the mass collection process. The mass collection process is basically using all the people that are, as much as possible, leaving China to try to sort of use them as a way to collect information. To come back to your comments about what we could lose and stuff like that, I totally agree with you that it would be sad to lose. There is alternative that can teach us about Chinese culture or Chinese language and stuff like that. It would be sad, indeed, that the Canadians sort of be duped to the point of missing exactly the threat that is in front of us. CSIS is not in the business of culture or language or anything like this. certain activities are actually a masquerade in order to be capable to perform greater harm to our organization or our countries, that's where we step in and stuff like that. I am certain you had a wonderful experience when you took the classes, just like this gentleman who went abroad and was wine and dine. He had a wonderful trip as well. When it comes to the trip abroad, we say in French, un voyage vaut plus que le livre, and it's really, really important because it forms your experience and your life and stuff like that. But if the trip is organized by a certain organization and they show you what they want you to see, they tell you what they want you to hear, and they get you to understand only what they want you to understand. In that perspective, we might have a little bit of a challenge. The concept of manipulating the mind and propaganda has been around for quite a long period of time. Thankfully, in our institution, and Carleton is one of them, we develop critical thinking, and we need to be capable to sort of be capable to balance those things and everything. But, and I'll stop here, from an intelligence point of view, we do have evidence of spy activities and people being targeted after they took a course because they shown interest in China, and that was a way to approach them by other than intelligence officer after that. The evidence is there.
Yeah, I might speak to your point in a different way. Some of you know that David Matus, who was shown in the film, thank goodness, and he and I were asked in 2006 that we would look into allegations that Falun Gong practitioners were being killed for their organs, heart, liver, lungs, and so on. We've now spent 10 years traveling around to about 50 countries talking about this. And ladies and gentlemen, we, to our dismay, found about 30 kinds of evidence that this is happening. Basically, if one of you wants a new liver, for example, and you can go on the internet, you can pay, the price varies, but it's a lot of money, $100,000 plus. You then basically fly to Shanghai, and you go to the #1 People's Hospital in Shanghai today, you can do this. And they take your blood types, your tissue types, they go on their computer, and they find a prisoner of conscience out in one of their many labor camps around the country, which I'm sure you didn't see when you were there. And the victim who meets the match is basically given some potassium, and they're made unconscious, we hope. Their liver is taken out, of course they're dead. The liver is flown to Shanghai in a People's Liberation Army plane. You get the new liver, and you fly back to Ottawa with the new liver, and that person is dead. In fact, we're going to Harvard University in a week or so to talk about this, but we are so dismayed that any regime, and by the way, there's only one government in the world that does this, to the best of our knowledge, and that's the government of China. I'm sure you were enormously impressed by Clive Ansley, because Clive Ansley, the lawyer you quoted, practiced law in Shanghai for 13 years until he couldn't take it anymore, and he's now back in Canada. One other story that maybe relates to your point, Ed. I met a mother in California whose son was a registered teacher in California, who went to teach near Guangzhou in China, and he was teaching 7 days a week. I think it was an illegal school, but in any event, his mother told him, his name's Nathan, stop doing this and come home. He told the director of the school that he was going to stop, and she told him, get out of here, go to Guangzhou and catch the plane back to California. That was the last thing his mother heard from him was a call on her voicemail from her son saying he was terrified, his passport had been stolen, he was sure he was going to die. And you know what? The next thing she heard, he'd been killed in a car accident. And the authorities, of course, said it was an accident. But she's a very stubborn woman. She had his body brought back to California, and the autopsy there showed that he'd been murdered. I wonder how many of you have friends who are going to teach or are teaching in China who hear this kind of thing. That's the kind of barbaric regime that is operating there. And we all respect the culture of China. I had thousands of constituents who were originated in China. Wonderful people. They're the most highly educated community, ethnic community, cultural community in Canada. The people are wonderful. The government is despicable. And as long as we get something like the Confucius Institute going around, as you did it so brilliantly, hoodwinking naive people like Mr. Bolton, naive or something else, and we're going to have these things. Now, why is there a Confucius Institute in Carleton? How come the University of Pennsylvania kicked them out, UBC? Why doesn't Carleton have the backbone to kick them out too? And if there's anyone here from Carleton, I hope you'll go back and consider this, because it's an absolute outrage that Carleton University should have a Confucius Institute. What's even worse to me, I'm from Edmonton, the public school board in Edmonton has a Confucius Institute in Edmonton. I mean, it's what is wrong with the people? We're the Chris Boltons of the world. How come they have so much sway, and the wonderful people you saw on the screen seem to get accepted in a few cases, like Toronto, seem to get ignored because we get hoodwinked. Somebody who's doing business in China. The next time somebody tells you that they're wonderful, China's a wonderful place, ask them if they're doing business in China. And do you know how many Canadians have lost their jobs because of our trade with China? Peter Navarro, who's a Harvard PhD, says that the United States has lost about 20 million jobs because of its trade with China, and it's lost about, I think it's 54,000 plants in the United States over the last 20 to 25 years. How many plants have to close in Canada before we start listening to people like Doris or Michael or people who are concerned about Canada and not trying to do more business in China? I think I'll stop there.
I know time is limited. Thank you very much. I just want to briefly respond to the two first for your infiltration. I think Michel already gave us very good insights. Just briefly, Confucius Institute is just one of Chinese government's overseas propaganda setup. That's the word, exactly worded by the former Communist Party propaganda chief. China spends annually over around 10 billion on overseas propaganda, overseas infiltration, including movies. Hollywood movies nowadays would not be made without Chinese sounds or whatever. And media, Chinese media, or the Chinese language media here in Canada is severely infiltrated by the Chinese government. I would say perhaps only a couple is independent from the influence of Chinese government. All the others either influenced or controlled. I was a Chinese language journalist before I making this film. I worked in Greater Toronto area, so I knew that very well. And sadly, and Chinese funds are seeking to buy our Canadian energy sectors as well. And now our current Prime Minister, I think he's very happy about that, welcoming China to do that, engaging China do that, which I do have concern, but that's another topic. So that's for infiltration. And for respond your comments, first of all, I thank you for your frank, candid comments. And as Chinese myself, I came to Canada 12 years ago. Of course, everyone, if you want to learn Chinese language and culture, that would be so happy for me. That's my own language and culture. I would encourage everyone to learn that because we have 5,000 years of history and culture, which we all as human beings can benefit from learning that. But the question is, at what cost? At what price we are paying to learn that? Is there any other alternatives than Confucius Institutes where we can also learn Chinese language and culture and perhaps learning better Chinese culture, authentic Chinese culture? And culture issue is another issue. I haven't got time to explore that area of Confucius Institute in my film. That's a big topic. To just put this topic into context, we all know China experienced experienced 10 years cultural revolution during the 1960s through 1970s. During that 10 years, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, Chinese traditional culture has already been cut off, destroyed. The traditional, Buddhism, Taoism, religion, architecture, arts, music, you name it, all forms of culture and heritage was already cut off and destroyed, mostly. And I was born in the 70s, and it's very regretful that I couldn't have a chance to experience such authentic Chinese culture, because it's all destroyed. But yeah, it's a little bit that if you are a scholar, you will see, it's not all. Okay, but just culture is another, area, it's very huge. But when we welcoming Confucius Institutes on our own campus, like McMaster University did, they were not sued, but complained. That means you give your prestige, you gave your say to a foreign government on your campus to dictate what to be taught, who teaches you. Perhaps situations in Carleton Confucius Institutes is a little bit different. I know that. I did research. They have their own steering council. They don't really use Chinese textbooks, that sort of thing. They say they have academic independence. But the thing is, look at the situation happening in McMaster University. They didn't want to close the Confucius Institutes. They spent a good year to negotiate, to discuss with Chinese partners, which is Hanban and University in China, who sent them the teachers. They wanted the Chinese partner to rescind that discriminatory hiring policy, but they failed. They couldn't do that because they say Confucius Institutes have to comply both Chinese and Canadian laws. That's in their contracts. And even though the Chinese law doesn't have any clause saying you need to discriminate people who practice Falun Gong, but the reality is the practitioners of Falun Gong, like David said, not only being discriminated but also killed in China. And they carried that policy into our campus. Even though Chinese teachers in Carleton University's Confucius Institute doesn't practice Falun Gong, they can say, I'm not Falun Gong practitioners, I'm not discriminated by this policy. But every teacher sent to your campus is hired under that policy. Would you say that it's not discriminative, non-discriminative? So even put that, just regardless any other academic freedom or other propaganda materials, censorship, self-censorship, all those, or espionage and spy, put that away. Just think about this discrimination things. I would argue, think about twice. It's different than Confucius Institutes do their thing independent outside of our campus, outside of our university. We're open and free society. You can come into our land and do your thing, but don't use our name. That's my
I think we have time for one more comment, and I've given the mic to Michel just to speak. And then if you wouldn't mind, if you want to continue the discussion, you're welcome to. We have a lovely classroom, room 1130. I encourage you all to head in that direction and continue the conversation in there afterwards.
Very, very, very quickly. We cannot answer it, we cannot definitely demonstrate in a short documentary, in a very short discussion on a round table here, what the operation and what the challenges that we have in protecting the country when we talk about spooks. By nature, the spies hide. The spy sort of are strategic, and we try to sort of camouflage a much as possible what we try to do and what the opponent is trying to do. If there's anything I've learned in my years in that field from the Chinese, is that the Chinese understand one thing a long, long, long time ago, which influence is much more powerful than control. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of Book 2,000 years ago that influence is the way to win a war. In his little book, 13 chapters, the 13th chapter is The Art of Using My Spy. We will not teach the Chinese how to suck an egg when it comes to spy. They know. They invented the game. So somewhere, somehow, you've got to sort of work hard, study hard, and observe for a long period of time to understand. But the notion of influence is central into their strategy. If I am capable to influence a person to the point where I can control now that person, I already won everything. This is what the Chinese have been trying with elected officials, trying to sort of lure them, seduce them, bribe them, and successfully go there. You know, even the previous government, the conservative government of Mr. Harper, was hard like a rock, was able to let himself influence. He sold a company in Alberta for $15 billion, oil and gas company. Try as a Canadian company, try as any company, a foreign company, to go buy an energy company in China. It'll never happen. It'll never happen because they understand the influence and the importance of that. But I'm a Canadian citizen. If I want to call the Premier of Alberta, if I want to call the Premier of the Prime Minister of Canada, I'll probably be put on hold and stay on hold for quite a long time. If I'm a Chinese company controlled by the Chinese government, by the way, who just bought for $15 billion a company in Alberta, and I call, I'm put through. This is the notion of influence they understood a long time ago. This is the risk that we're facing.
Excellent point. Can I just, you said the last word, but can I just say, if anybody wants more details about this, it's a fantastic film. If you go to Google and you look at David Kilgour, you go to my website and you'll see a wonderful photograph of you in Washington. And there are about six linked articles underneath it. New York Review of Books, a lot of really serious stuff talking about this issue. And you can get a lot from, including your comments are on there too, of course.
Actually, even while I was making this film, I invited Carlton to participate, but they rejected. As you saw in the film, right? They all rejected. I only got access to 3 Confucius institutes. Actually, 2 of them just started interview, and one of them, after my first day filming and interviewing, they canceled my second day interview. They asked me to sign a media consent, which gave them the rights to pre-screen or even withdraw any interview content they deemed inappropriate. And when I refused, and they canceled my second day filming. So that was my first access, and then that taught me, okay, I only got one chance with any Confucius institutes. So I would better make better use of that interview. So, even for the screening, I personally invited all the staffs at Carleton Confucius Institutes, as well as the other staff I can reach, and they, other than one email response, say sorry we are not available. Others didn't even bother replying me. If I welcome discussion. The purpose for me to make this film is just bring this issue to the attention of the public and educators and governments. Any comments and debate is welcoming, I think. But unfortunately, it's very, very challenging for me to get access to the other side of the story. Right? If you're so confident, why not just reply to those? Because they're not small concerns. They're not small amount of concerns to be neglected. You should reply to those serious concerns. I'm not saying you should close today Confucius Confucius Institutes, but I really encourage you, any educational institution which hosts a Confucius Institute on campus, reconsider your partnership. Really think, ask yourself, what is the values and principles you need to hold on? When you hosting a Confucius Institute on campus, what is your cost? What is your price you have to pay? And there are so many. If you just Google Confucius Institute concerns or criticisms, you find a whole page of Wikipedia, give you all the evidences what happened. So last thing is just if you would leave your comments on paper and to the camera person outside, I really appreciate you do that, and share this film to your friends if you're concerned about this issue or you have some different perspective, and just visit the website in the name of confuciusmovie.com, and all the information are there. And if you use social media, just like our page in the name of @ConfuciusFilm. Yeah, just share it.
Thank you so much. That concludes our afternoon programming. If you all want to visit our cinema cafe or our festival fair, our evening programming will begin in the amphitheater at 6:30. We're showing a documentary called Journey